So thank you, everyone. We're going to get started. I'm Steve Jorson with Northeast Metro Climate Action. We are hosting this event tonight. Northeast Metro Climate Action is a volunteer-run community organization with members in White Bear Lake, Vadnais Heights, North Oaks, Matamidi, and Shoreview. Our mission is to raise awareness on climate change through events like this. We hold events like this every month during the fall, winter, and spring. In summers, we take off to focus more on some of the community activities. We also work with state and local representation, our elected representatives to advance climate action. And then we participate in community activities like we helped with the White Bear Lake cleanup last Saturday. Our land acknowledgement, Northeast Metro Climate Action acknowledges we are meeting on traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people who continue to live in this area and exercise their treaty rights. Tonight we are co-hosted by Resilient Roseville, Vote Climate, was Gene, there's James, Chuck, Individual North Metro Environmental Team, Climate Justice Team of St. Croix Valley Indivisible, Sustainable Stillwater, and the Vadnais Heights Green Team. Before we get started tonight, I'll announce our April event. It is going to be on Earth Day, April 22nd. We have a member of the Climate Generation, we're going to be talking about educating youth on climate change and clean energy solutions. That will be at the White Bear Library on April 22nd at 6:30 p.m. We'll also be on Zoom. Couple of housekeeping events, items. People who are online, if you have questions for TJ, you can put them into the chat. And also, people here have questions, you can ask them. TJ will have time for questions at the end, or you might be able to interrupt him in the middle. And so today's talk by our own TJ Molaski is talking about gardening for climate change.
Hi, everyone. I am getting over a cold, so if you cannot hear me, just kind of wave and I'll try to speak up a little bit. But thanks so much for being here today. Again, on behalf of NEMCA, the Northeast Metro Climate Action, and the Maplewood Area Historical Society, I'd like to welcome you to the Bruentrup Heritage Farm. And I'm really glad you're all here today. What a great turnout. I guess that is proof that we all want to get in our gardens, right? I think they're like itching to go. Don't do it yet. Not yet. We don't want to do it yet. It's too early still. As much as we want to get out there. Again, I just want to push our April event one more time. I know Steve brought it up, but please consider coming to our April event, which is on Earth Day, April 22nd, Tuesday, April 22nd. It's at the White Bear Library, and that is on educating youth in climate action. So I think that's going to be a great event. That's at 6:30 as well. I'm TJ Molaski. I'm the executive director here at the Maplewood Area Historical Society. I am also a member of the NEMCA leadership team. I'm so proud to be part of both organizations. I think we've got really great organizations here in the Twin Cities that are working so hard and so diligently to make sure that we have a planet, right? And then we have organizations like the Maplewood Area Historical Society that's working so hard to share our history, our cultural history, but also our native landscaping history as well. And those are important things for us to consider as we all will go back home to our own homes and gardens today and come up with plans for the next year and the next decade of what these spaces are going to look like. Museums are a vital part of how we tell the stories of who we are, who we've been, and how we live together. The Maplewood Area Historical Society here preserves our cultural heritage and works to share the ways that we're different and the same, reflecting on the diversity and the heritage of our community is a critical part of our museum's work. We cannot claim to be truly essential to society if we are not accessible to all. So again, want to make sure that we are constantly showcasing everything that we're doing to make this really a community asset here in terms of the history and the cultural and the native landscape. We believe that equity is our goal and inclusion is how we move towards that goal. Kind of 30 words right now. I'll just share a quick story with you. Some of you know this. We received a $130,000 grant from the National Archives to help us digitize 120,000 photographs, cataloging and tracking Maplewood area history. That's since been pulled because we use the word diversity in our application. So we're going to keep using it though. Okay, yeah, we're going to keep using it. So diversity describes the breadth and experiences of our perspectives. As Maplewood Area Historical Society strives to build community through preservation of all of our shared stories, we've chosen to focus on 4 distinct cultural groups that play an important role in our past, present, and future. We invite you to learn more about how we are all woven together through the stories of our Indigenous Dakota people, the Yankee Americans, the German immigrants, and our Hmong refugee neighbors. The Maplewood Area Historical Society exists on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. This rich, fertile, beautiful land has a complex and layered history, holding great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards. We recognize that we are the beneficiaries of this land, which was stolen by the U.S. government through various unhonored treaties. From this place of acknowledgement and truth, we're extending our hands and hearts to our Indigenous Dakota people who made these areas their home long before the building of our beautiful cities. And to all the Indigenous people who continue to make this area their home, we invite you to learn more about how these original people of the area considered this place home, continue to consider this place home, and how we all benefit from the injustices. So, getting all that out of the way, we're here to talk about gardening today, which is one of my favorite things to do. In the summertime, I'm here all the time. And in the summertime, you'll often find me out in the gardens. It's a really great place here. It's a magical place. How many of you have been here in August or September? It's pretty beautiful out there. We've got beautiful gardens. I have to say, not all of our gardens are native plantings, and I think that's okay. And I think we have to be aware of what we're trying to accomplish. So, for example, here at the Maplewood Area Historical Society, we really focus our garden plans on a number of different areas. We do focus on native plantings. When we talk about native plantings, we're talking about plants that are local to an area, an ecosystem, usually prior to colonization, which in this case is about 1750 in Minnesota. So we're talking about plants that were naturalized here, that existed here prior to white colonizers coming. That also doesn't include any cultivated plants that the native people were growing as well. So those are not considered native plants, but they are just as important in the story that we tell. So we do focus on planting a lot of native plants. If you'll look out the window here, when I started here 4 years ago, this oak savanna that we've now, or we're in the process of restoring out the window, was all buckthorn. You couldn't see through there. So in about 4 years, we've been able to clear that all out, and we are slowly working to reincorporate native planting into that area that would have been the ground cover under oak trees in this area at the time of early settlement. So that's just one of the things we're doing here. Yes.
One of the ways to get rid of buckthorn to dig up the roots and then burn them, because I think I saw that at the Wood Lake Nature Center yesterday.
They're probably doing that. I think the only way to get rid of buckthorn is to dig it up and get rid of the roots, and then to make sure that berries are not spreading. That's the other thing. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do it by hand. A lot of people do it with goats. I mean, that's kind of a trendy thing right now, is to have goats go out and eat the buckthorn. Goats will eat any woody plant, and they really go after buckthorn. It does still leave the root core, which can put up shoots, so you have to continuously go after that. But really, the only way to truly eradicate buckthorn is to make sure we're not spreading berries and that we're getting rid of all of the roots so it can't send up suckers to create more plants, which create more berries, which create more plants. So burning, I think, is probably a great way to do that. We want to be careful about burning, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too, because that again sends carbon up into our atmosphere. And one of the things with gardening, which we'll talk about, and I'm totally off my script, so this is great. Yeah. Is that as we know, we're all hopefully here today because we care about our planet and climate change, and we're somewhat aware of it. The main factors of climate change are carbon emissions and carbon in our atmosphere. So burning anything puts carbon into our atmosphere. And one of the things that I like to say is any green thing is better than a brown thing. So any green thing will collect carbon and store it. Any brown thing has the potential to burn and send that carbon into the atmosphere. So we'll talk again today about this idea of what native, non-native, beneficial, invasive species are when we're talking about gardening and plants and that sort of thing. Looking out at the rooms of people we have here today, this is great. I just want to ask, how I think for NEMCA and for Moss, how did you all hear about this event today? I think we want to make sure that we are utilizing, spreading our knowledge. Did we get it? The paper, like our press, Facebook, awesome. Email, great.
Elders Climate Action.
Awesome. So this is good for us to all know about how we can continue to go and move forward in promoting these sorts of programs that are really going to help our climate. So I'll give you a little bit about my personal gardening story here. I'm one of the few people I know that when I was in 4th grade and doing what I thought I was going to do in 4th grade. And I owe that to my 4th grade teacher, Miss Dahlgren. And I was in 4th grade, and I read the book Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Now there's controversy around Laura Ingalls Wilder, I know, but at the time I wanted to be Almanzo. I wanted my own team of oxen. I wanted my own huge garden. I wanted to have my big pumpkin at the county fair. I wanted to win a ribbon. I wanted people to prize my sheep. I wanted all of that. And so in 4th grade, we gave our first oral reports. What I want to be when I grow up. Nothing too creative, that's what of course, everyone gets up and they want to be an astronaut or a paleontologist or a firefighter, all these things, a teacher. And I got up there and I was the smallest kid in my class. I mean, I was tiny. I got up there and I said, when I grow up, I want to be an old-time farmer. After I talked, Miss Dahlgren called me up to her desk and she goes, TJ, you can't be an old-time farmer, but you can work in museums and you can teach people about history and about agriculture. So that's when I knew I was going to work in museums, and here I am today. For a while, for a good decade, I was the state agricultural historian for the state of Minnesota at the Minnesota Historical Society. And then when the opportunity came for me to apply here to be the executive director, I jumped on it because I saw such potential here at the Bruentrup Heritage Farm and the Maplewood Area Historical Society. I saw potential in the history that is this great community of the Eastern Metro that we have, but also the land around us. We're in 27 acres of restored prairie right now. And after the talk is done today, we can go walk around and I can show you some things as well. There's 27 acres of restored prairie around here that was previously just alfalfa fields. And so that's been restored. When I was first coming on, again, we had all that buckthorn, and I was like, what a great chance to eradicate that and provide more space and more native planting. And then we also had lawns and lawns and lawns that we were just mowing and watering. We have an irrigation system that ran in 20 years ago, which I hate. And so we've really started to minimize that, much to the chagrin of some of our old-time volunteers here. But we've had this idea and this plan moving forward of looking at the landscape and providing a native landscape, providing a 1912 arts and crafts sort of ornamental landscape, and then also providing a cultural landscape for providing events and programs out here as well. So one of the things that I just mentioned was we shrunk our lawn landscape. We're a nonprofit organization. We have to make money somehow. We make money through weddings, usually in the summertime. It's not my favorite thing. I wish we wouldn't have to do it, but that also means we have to have lawns. So what are the evils of that? And if we get that money and we can stay afloat, we can continue to do other good things. And we can continue to put that money into making sure that the museum exists, that these buildings are preserved, that we continue to provide landscaping around in the 27 acres that is native and beneficial. I think that sometimes weighs itself out. And that's what I want people to think about. We shouldn't ever feel shamed for gardening. I think sometimes we get people that are like, you only can plant native and you can only plant xeriscaping, and you know, like, oh my gosh. And I just think, do what you need to do, but be thoughtful about it. You know, I think there's three things that we want to really consider when we're talking about gardening for climate action. And the first is knowing why you're gardening. The second is knowing about the plants that we have the potential to plant in our areas. And then the third is developing a plan that's right for you. So for some people, you know, having a xeriscaping, all native, completely indigenous planting scape in their yard is great. That's not accessible for everyone. And so I am of the mindset that as long as you're trying and you're trying to do your best and you understand that you shouldn't be using pesticides and you shouldn't be using herbicides and you shouldn't be using chemicals, there's room for some, you know, change in how you landscape, and then it doesn't have to be one way or the other. I also think that if walking through a patch of freshly mown Kentucky bluegrass is what gets you rejuvenated to go out and fight the good fight, have it, do it, you know, like make that right for you, but please don't use herbicides or pesticides on that. But it's about being thoughtful, right? It's about being thoughtful. I don't know how thoughtful these huge acre-long yards are that I see people spending hours mowing on gas lawnmowers all summer long. It's just so thoughtless, right? And so that's a big part of this. So I'm going to ask you all to, if you want to speak up, if you want to talk to your neighbor or whatever, but why are you interested in gardening? Why are you here today? What's the plan? I think we have to start with knowing why we're gardening, right? Like what's our plans for gardening? What is our desire for gardening? Anyone want to say your desire for gardening? Or what you hope to get out?
Preserve pollinators.
Perfect. Yeah. Great.
It's one of my few Zen activities where I can balance out the, you know, activism and that sort of thing to get back into being more grounded, literally grounded.
I love that. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. If I'm out, you know, pruning the roses, which again, not native, but do provide, you know, access for other habitat animals and insects here. It's a grounding experience. It helps me recognize, okay, I can take a breath, I can breathe, and then I can go on to take that energy and channel it into broader fights or bigger fights that we need to have around climate action. What else?
It is rejuvenating.
It is. It's very rejuvenating. I mean, there's all kinds of studies about sticking your fingers in the dirt or walking around barefoot, right? And how that really does increase our positive energy and our endorphins and all of this. Yeah, Kathy.
I've gotten to know about plants from being on the Badness Green team. But in the midst of this, then Badness put a pathway through our area. Well, as long as they've dug up my yard, before it goes back to where it was, we're trying to think differently about how it's gonna look afterwards.
And you're not making a grass lawn.
Yeah.
I mean, gotta have to mow. It's just,
And these are all great things. Who here grows vegetables, right? Growing vegetables is a huge part of climate action in your backyard. The more we can reduce transportation of these huge trucks that are guzzling fossil fuels, the more we can hone in locally, the more we can produce real food that isn't cardboard food at a grocery store. That's better for everyone, and it's certainly better for the climate. So these are all great reasons, you know, to be gardening. You can garden anywhere from really, again, that idea of, yes, I want a pollinator habitat. I'm going to do, you know, take my whole yard. That's great. I hope you have the time, energy, and money to do that. It takes a lot of that, right? And it's great and awesome. And we try that here, but we're chunking out a little bit every year here. And so I think that's one thing to consider it as well, is like, what can I do now? And know that now means that it might not take full effect for 8 years, right? Like you gotta, gardening is a slow process. It's a very slow process.
But it's a hopeful process.
It's a hopeful process. Hope, I love it. I used to belong to an organization called the Grange, and it's an old 19th century, started in the 19th century organization about farming and agriculture. It's really kind of a way for farmers to have a collective voice. But one of the things they talk about is the hope and the faith of gardening, right? That a seed is a promise. And so you plant that seed and there's a promise that there'll be a new plant and that sort of thing. So this is all great. And I think this is where we want to start with, why are we gardening? Because that's going to then inform us on our plan and the design and the plants that we can choose to use. So it's also really important to, again, know about the plants. We're lucky in Minnesota. We've got really great resources here. The University of Minnesota, the Landscape Arboretum. There's a lot of great gardening activists right here locally. YouTube is a plethora of information for learning about plants. I also have on my phone an app. Let me figure out what the name is now here. It's called Picture This. You all have Picture This?
Yeah.
I love it. And it's like $7 a year or something, isn't it? Like it's nothing. And then you can click on it and it will tell you if the plant is healthy or not, but it will also tell you where it's native to and if it's considered invasive in your area. So that's a really great thing to have. It's called Picture This. So I encourage you all, Picture This is not sponsoring this event today, but it's a great, tons of resources on there. We've got the best plants for our landscape are going to be native, because they're going to be things that are accustomed to the climate. Now our climate is changing. So what does that mean? I was talking with our head gardener here, Ted, who has a small cabin up north, and he's talking about how, there are no more birch trees are dying up north because the climate is changing. So what are we doing to try to change how we can plant and still create an ecosystem that's going to be beneficial for those beings that are there that need that? And as we look at climate change, I think we need to be very careful about just what exactly we look at in these are the strict yeses and these are the strict nos in our planting. We talk about native plants. Again, those are plants that have been here pre-colonization that aren't necessarily cultivated plants. So of course, before white colonization, both the Dakota and the Anishinaabe and the Ho-Chunk area were practicing agriculture. So we had corn, squash, and beans. We don't consider those sunflowers. We don't consider those native. But again, those can be beneficial, right? Those are vegetables, and we talked about that. Non-native plants are plants that are foreign to an area, and they can be beneficial, neutral, or invasive, which is the big no-no. We want to stay away from our invasive plants. And non-native plants can generally include annual flowers and most of our vegetables and crop plants as well. Our invasive plants are plants that are non-native and overtake a habitat. So non-native isn't necessarily bad. And I'll talk about one of the things we do here with non-native plants. I'll talk about two things we do with non-native plants here. But non-native plants generally overtake the native species and drown out the native species, displacing them and disrupting the entire ecosystem there. In Minnesota, the top invasive plants we have, anyone want to shout out the top invasive plants we've got in Minnesota?
Purple buckthorn.
Buckthorn. Buckthorn's a big one. Burdock, garlic mustard, milfoil,
Creeping Charlie,
Grecian foxglove, wild parsnip. Our garlic mustard, like all those things are really came in with best intentions or accidentally, and now are really causing havoc in our landscapes. So those are really important things for us to be able to identify as we go out to either plan or continue to work on our existing gardens as well. Again, if we could all go and plant completely native plants in a great xeriscaping system, awesome. We can't, sometimes people don't want to. I love some flowers that are not native to Minnesota. I mean, roses are beautiful, right? They smell great. They give me energy. They give me life. All of our vegetables are not native. So growing garden, food in our gardens is another thing. I want to give you an example that we practice here at the Maplewood Area Historical Society. And those of you that have been here in July, August, or September will maybe know what I'm talking about here. So we're big proponents of butterflies here. Again, pollinators, it's a huge thing. Minnesota has 57 different species of butterfly. And many of them are endangered or on the watch list right now, including our state butterfly, the monarch. And so when I came here, I was of the age when we did reports on monarchs, and like monarchs were a big thing growing up just because we practiced all the state things, right? And so that stuck in my head. And when I came here, I was like, how can we support monarchs and other butterflies, but monarchs in particular? So I was going around and some of the old time gardeners were saying, well, we've got milkweed. We've got milkweed. Isn't that what you need for monarchs? It's like, well, perhaps. But the milkweed we had was showy milkweed, which is not native, and it does not really generally attract monarchs. So while there was best intentions laid there, what we want is swamp milkweed and some other native varieties that the monarchs are attracted to. And then it was, well, if we have milkweed, that's what the monarchs eat. And I said, no, that's not what monarchs eat. It's what the larvae, the caterpillars eat. That's where the eggs are laid. We still need a host plant for the monarchs to come here. And if we don't have host plants for monarchs to come here, they're not going to care about the milkweed that's here because they're not going to eat before they lay their eggs. So we have to think about planting and host patterns as well. And so what we did is we took a strip of, it was just lawn out by where you all park today in the parking lot. We took that strip of lawn and we tilled it up and we covered it with cardboard and we drowned out all the weeds and the grass that was there. It was dry and ugly in the summertime. It was just, we didn't do anything with it. And it's about a 3-foot swath that runs about 50 feet. And we just planted zinnias there. Zinnias aren't native to Minnesota, but you know where they're native? Mexico, where the monarchs overwinter. And so that's a natural host plant for monarchs. So every year, you can go down here this summer, last summer even, and you can count 12 to 16 monarchs at a time flying around. I mean, it's amazing. And one of the things that I really like to, oftentimes we talk about climate change and it seems so dire and so dark, right? Like, oh, what are we going to do? 75% of the land in Minnesota is owned privately. That means each of us have a role we can play in how we utilize that land and plan for it. That's a big chunk of land. And we just took a small strip. And I like to think that we helped, preserve some of those monarchs for this year. And now we know this year we've seen for the first time, I think in a decade and a half, a rise in the monarch population in Mexico. And hopefully that'll come up here again. So you can make a difference. Small things do make a difference. And there are, these beneficial non-native plants as well that can really help. Another beneficial non-native that we use here is as we are reestablishing our savanna here under the oak trees, we have a short fescue. And a short fescue is green. It will grow under trees. It likes to grow in the shade. So if you have shady areas and you want something to keep the ground covered, a short fescue is really good. Short fescue is from California, so it's not native to here. But it grows in the shade and it will hold your dirt down. It's a good cover crop while you're working, or even if you're not. If you just need something where you want some green, a short fescue is better than nothing. Yeah.
Do you start that from seed or you just plant?
Short fescue, we just use seeds. We just overseed. I always overseed. I don't like using plugs and I don't like using seed starts for 2 reasons. I feel like we should be growing things that are within our climate, right? So if you can plant a seed outside here and it can produce what you need it to produce by the end of our season, that's good. That's a beneficial thing, but also providing or starting from a seed start generally involves a lot of plastic and a lot of non-recyclable plastics. So that's why I like just planting from seed. Is there a question or
Yes.
Steve? Yeah.
There's a question on like, where can we buy native plants here in the Twin Cities? Are there outlets for that? Some of the garden centers?
All of your garden centers will now have native plants. And a lot of them are native plants that aren't even billed as native plants, right? Echinacea, great plant. And that's not always listed as a native plant, but that's a native plant. Some of our I'll just list off some of our great pollinator friendly plants that are native right now. Goldenrod is a great plant because it blooms for a very long time. The other thing, I'm just going to back up one real quick minute here, is we want to in our planning of creating landscapes for climate action, particularly for pollinators, we want to make sure that we are always having flowers that are in bloom throughout the year, or plants, not just flowers, but plants that are in bloom as well. So we want to be thinking about that. So as you go through your gardens, and we're talking about hope and, like this is a long process, when you go out into your garden in May, if you don't see anything blooming, think about, oh, can I find a plant that blooms this time of year to introduce to my garden? Or if you go out in August and you notice you had all these blooms in July, but now there's nothing, what can I introduce in August that will bloom? And keep those pollinators fed throughout the whole year. Anyway, going kind of back to the question, what to look for in nurseries. Goldenrod, Virginia bluebell is a great one as well, really pretty. Native plant, really beautiful plant. Aster, this prairie here has so much aster in it. I'm hoping we have enough rain this spring that it will send a blue up. There are times when this prairie looks purple, like it's just this mist of purple over the prairie here.
Any particular type of aster?
We don't want to use, there's some non-native asters that we don't want to use. And so most of the asters, I believe, that are considered invasive are not sold in nurseries right now. So luckily we've had some action where there's been some laws against selling some of these non-native species. Although be careful because there are still non-native invasive species that are sold at nurseries. So again, really do your research on what the various cultivars are, the individual varieties of asters are, or any plant. Blazing stars, beautiful, stunning plants, which are great. That's one of my favorites. Giant hyssop. Wild bergamot, also really great. Something that's bee balm. And if you've never taken wild bergamot and crushed it in your hand and smelled, it's amazing. I mean, that is one of my grounding moments, is going out onto the prairie and crushing up some wild bergamot, just smelling. It's great. Columbine is another one, and that's great because that also grows in shady areas as well. So these are some really great plants to have that are native and provide really a great variety of food sources for a variety of pollinators as well. Yeah, so I mean, I think again, just getting back to knowing what you're planting and coming up with a plan, do the research. It's really, how many of you, I will admit to this, I'll admit to it before I even say it. How many of you go and overspend at the nursery? Do you see something? Oh, I'm gonna get a whole hatchback full of plants. And you're like, oh, maybe I should have planned this out. But yeah, I'll admit to it. I do it. But yeah, we want to be very thoughtful about planning. And I think the great thing about this time of year is we still have time to plan. We're probably not putting out any seeds right now if you're going to actually sow outside for another month or so. Usually Mother's Day is when we that's been the traditional Minnesota, plant on Mother's Day. However, now I think it's probably a little earlier. We're in a zone B now in this area. If you're from these neighborhoods, or a zone 5. Yeah, zone 5B. I think we're 5. We're not 4 anymore. No, we're 5B from the heat of this. Yeah. So 5A on the outer, and then some heat rings will be a 5B even. So this is like, we jumped in a decade, we've just gone up, so. This is important now to think about. If you can do one thing, Larry, yeah,
Well, I just want to ask you to just talk about external factors, things like live on a somewhat busy road with road salt, which is an external factor to impact,
yeah,
or heavy traffic, or those four-legged friends that visit your yard that love the deer and now. So external issues about how
external
to garden.
issues, yeah, external issues to garden. The number one thing about gardening is soil health.
So,
Right, so you want soil health. The ideal soil for gardening means you don't have to use any tools. You should be able to just put your fingers right into the soil and dig it up with your fingers. That is not common in our area. I have to tell you, the 27 acres here is all clay. And so we're doing a lot to try to amend that soil, but it's soil amendment. So in things where you've got close to roads and road salts, you might want to consider something that's a little hardier, particularly if you've got shade on boulevard trees and that sort of thing. So doing something like a clover or a fescue type grass might work and just kind of hold the ground there. You might not want to invest in more expensive plants that are going to really suffer from the road salt. So you're probably just going to look for some, mass planting of ground cover in that area that's going to work for you. Deer are always a challenge. We have a house bunny here who's locked away now. Yeah, house bunny. Danvers, I call him a house bunny in difference to the rabbits that are outside, which I hate, that eat all of my roses and eat all of my, I have the rabbits. And so, I think that we have to think about it being part of the ecosystem, right? So if we're gardening for climate change, we have to look at our ecosystem. Now, our ecosystems are, this is not native white-tailed deer country here. Like, it's not. Deer have come in, turkeys. Yeah, turkeys were introduced to Minnesota in Red Wing in 1930, I think, from the governor of Missouri. Sent some turkeys up to Minnesota, and now we got turkeys everywhere, And so there's this, like, again, but who doesn't love to see an elegant deer with its fun, right? Like, it's a big thing when you see it until you realize it's eating all your plants. Rabbits I could go without.
Yeah, and I ate all the clover, the specialized, the legumes, the varieties that they suggested. They ate every last little bit of it. And it was nice.
But you all look at my junipers out here. We jokingly call those my Dr. Seuss junipers,
Oh, yeah.
because the rabbits ate up 3 feet of the junipers last year.
Yeah.
Because then every time it snowed, they'd eat more.
Right.
So those are my Dr. Seuss junipers.
Bonsai, your journal.
So it's one of those things. I think there's netting. Netting can be expensive. Fencing's expensive. You might be able to fence out deer. It's going to be really hard to fence out rabbits. They get in everywhere. I would say here, it's maybe an unpopular opinion for some folks. We have a nice relationship with some falconers who come out and hunt rabbit out here in the winter time, which makes me happy because then I can feel like, yeah.
City where we have smaller lots. I mean, some people will use, like, there's a product called rabbit scrown that's all natural for some of their they're really special areas. And then, have planted clover, white clover that the bunnies love. And so there's almost like plantings that are for the bunnies.
Yeah.
And then there's other plants that they can nibble at, but then they don't try it where the rabbit scrown is. It's just.
Yeah, that's an option. Yeah. It's not an option for me because I don't want to contribute to the rabbit population at all. So but for some people, I think also we try here. There's a lot of really great we're a historic farm. It's a great story. This farm started in 1891. It was a wedding present from Ida Wagner's parents to her and her husband Wilhelm Bruentrup. And it was 40 acres and this tiny little house and a couple of cows. And by 1912, they had done well enough that they had built the big barn out there. And they had, a number of buildings. They had 24 cattle, hogs, 200 acres, and had enough money to build this big house. Now, the original house is actually encapsulated inside this one, but in 1912, frugal Germans that they were, they paid for an architectural student from the University of Minnesota. So they didn't have to pay for an architect, they paid for the student because they thought they could save some money, but design this big house here. Well, along with that came ornamental gardens. But with that, there's all kinds of historic ways of trying to keep rabbits out, right? Like planting marigolds, throwing soap shavings down, using hair from your dog. There's all these things that are not harmful, that can be beneficial. Now they work to various degrees and stuff, but that's one way to try to do it as well, is look at some of these historic components of gardening. Not all historic components of gardening are good. This is not organic gardening. Let me tell you, they used a heck of a lot of arsenic in their fields. They used a heck of a lot of really bad things in their gardens. So, I think a lot of people think, oh, the good old days, it was all great. It wasn't always. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I've heard that growing rice, it takes a lot of arsenic. Is that because they used to put arsenic in the rice paddies, or?
I can't answer that question. I don't know much about growing rice. So I don't know, but it could be.
I'm gonna research that now. I've heard that you should soak your rice overnight to
Mhm.
get some of the arsenic out of it. Yeah.
Well, we might as well be dead now.
So again, I think, I've spewed a lot. Yeah.
So I'm one of those people who has lots of gardens and have for 40 years. And I'm not, I haven't used as much native plants as I would like to. Part of my issue is water usage,
No.
and I'm really wanting to cut down on that. Frankly, I have found Milorganite to be a wonderful way to repel the deer and the rabbits who are just ready to take care of those little iris bulbs. when they
Yeah.
come home.
As soon as they're out.
But anyhow, so my question is how would you go about incorporating natives into an existing landscape design?
That's a great question. I think what you might want to do, well, let's see here. I think what you might want to do is really consider looking at a chunk, right? Like, do you have a garden? This is for anyone, not just you, but do you have a kind of standalone garden that you could either completely redo? Is it small enough, and are there, financial considerations beneficial enough for you to invest in that? Or are you wanting to plug in natives that might complement your non-natives?
That's what I was.
And so if you're doing that, I think there's a number of things you can do, and that's looking at, the internet's amazing, right? We all carry computers in our pockets these days. And so I think it's a really, probably a fairly easy thing if you know what's already there to just Google companion planting. And then from that, you can narrow down your native plants as well. Or non-native beneficials. Again, I think, we've got sunflowers are great for birds. And zinnias, I'm gonna, praise zinnias here. I think they're great plants, but some of those things that can be planted and you can kind of look at for a season, and they're not going to necessarily come back, right? So it can give you an idea of what could I do here? What could this look like if I planted a couple of zinnias seeds here this year, to kind of look and imagine what maybe replacing that with an echinacea plant the following year is, or something along those lines. Could be a way to kind of move into it without having to completely redesign a whole area. Water is really important. I think one of the things I love to talk about is mulch. I don't know if any of you saw the huge mulch pile we have out here. We mulch everything. Mulching will keep your moisture in, it will keep your weeds out. So if you don't want weeds, the other thing to do is to just plant things as close together as possible. I don't ever look at what the back of a seed packet says with how far apart you should plant something. The closer you can plant things together, they're going to choke out any weeds that you don't want. And they're going to just take care of themselves. I broadcast seed radishes and just have radishes all year. And they choke out everything else. I don't ever have to weed it, you know.
I do have to say though that I tried something like that with zinnias last year, because I
Okay.
decided to take my raised vegetable garden and screw it, I was gonna grow flowers so I could cut, bring in the house and attract beneficials. Well, anyhow, you can have some, it can be too much. And they got, they got fungus and
Oh.
stuff like that because it was so dense
Yeah,
from the seeds. Zinnias just grow like
they do grow like crazy.
abandoned.
Yeah.
Kind of space those a little.
You could space them out. You can also go for zinnias and take out the under leaves so that
I
there
feel
can be
so bad
some
about
air.
killing them. I'm sorry. I don't like them because it's like, I don't mind thinning lettuce. I eat that, but.
No, I wouldn't feel bad about, well, and I wouldn't necessarily thin zinnias. What I'd do is I would strip the under leaves to get air in there. So to aerate,
Okay.
leave your up, because they're not getting sun anyway. So leave your upper leaves, and then just make sure you're cutting, take your flowers inside, make bouquets. Because that's gonna send up more plants anyway, because those plants are wanting to reproduce, right? Like that's what every living thing wants to do is reproduce. And so the plants are wanting to send up more flower heads to create more seeds to reproduce.
TJ, go back to just mixing your perennials and annuals and
Mhm.
how to do that in a healthy garden way.
If you've got established perennials, you probably know already what they're gonna look like in terms of their spacing and stuff. And so you'll be able to know how tall they are and what they kind of look like in general. So from that, you would take that information and incorporate annuals that are either in front lower, right, or on the sides, similar height or taller in the back. So you're gonna look at that information. Again, it's the planning of it. And this is the great time of year to plan, right? Because again, we all want to get outside. It is way too early to do anything. Please let those beneficial pollinators and bugs sleep right now. They're asleep. We really should not be cleaning up our yards until our nights are, upper 40s, kind of consistently upper 40s, lower 50s. That's when it's safe because those bugs have woken up and are kind of back on track to living for the summer now. But right now, all these piles of leaves and everything are all the sticks and dried grasses are housing these beneficial plants in the biomes that we need and we're trying to protect. So yeah. And then did you have a
Yeah, I was just gonna say for potentially design ideas, a couple things. I'm a member of Wild Ones and their national website, which is they have, if you look at garden designs, they have different cities that have actually created designs by professional plant landscapers. So you could get, like, it'll show a whole yard, but you could get just a little spot, like maybe on whatever side of and they have pictures of the plants. So like Minneapolis, you could look. And then another thing, there's chapters around the city, or around Minnesota, that they do tours. And so I've found that looking at people's gardens is very helpful. Like to just, and ask them, like how they started or that type of thing, to actually see the plants.
A gardener is going to love if you stop and ask them questions. They're going to love it.
Yeah.
I was just going to go back. Wild Ones, I'd forgotten about that. Wild Ones is a great resource because they've got the kind of layout. So they'll have like a rain garden layout, or they'll have like a boulevard layout, or they'll have a slopey layout,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you what plants. And I think they even tell you like the number of plants you need
Yeah,
for the
so
area.
there's local chapters, like the local, there's a couple like Wild Ones Twin Cities is a local chapter. Prairie Edge, which may not sound like a Twin Cities, but that's in Eden Prairie. So you can check different sites that they have different plans too. And then another place, I got a Lawns to Lagoons grant.
Nice, congratulations.
Not last April, not last October, but the year before. And then last year, Blue Thumb is the administrator of that, but they had a Lawns to Lagoons garden tour. And so you could go to people's places. So look for that for this year, but
Yeah,
just people that, regular people, not landscapers that maybe just took $400 and now have a pocket garden.
is everyone familiar with lawns to legumes?
No,
Are
how do
you-
you spell it?
It's lawns
Oh, lawns, okay.
to legumes.
Yeah, we got denied.
You got denied? Yeah, keep
Yeah,
applying. So, and you apply through the watershed districts?
You can, okay, so I just want to interrupt.
Yeah,
So what watershed is, each watershed has grant. Because I,
each watershed will have
I
grants,
serve
so
on
you
the
have to
board
know, yeah.
for Belamo. And then White Bear has a watershed, so you can get a grant, apply for a grant. And get monies to help you do different things like that.
Diversity in the application.
These are local.
Like that, we just look at
Yeah.
what your plans are and, you know. And the other piece is when you were talking about sprinklers. Now we have sprinkler heads that we're giving grants to.
Oh.
So, you know,
Nice.
I don't know what this watershed is.
This is Washington North Ram. Is it Washington North Ramsey here? I think it's Washington North Ramsey or North Ramsey, Washington.
I
or
just know
something.
what Belamo is because,
Yeah.
like I said, I serve on the board, the tech board.
Belamo is Vadnais Lakes Area Water Management.
Right. But I don't even know what White Bear is or, you know, what all these different areas are, but if you know what watershed you're in, and then you just go on your watershed. Right, then look for grants in there,
Thank you.
and then start to, like, if you want a grant, you better apply now.
Yeah. The other thing is, I just want the watersheds will also send out free site visits for you, and they're starting those now. So they will schedule those to come out. And they will have a professional come out and walk your site and look at the site and make suggestions and offer you, tell you what grants are available, and they can even help you with those grants. So watershed districts are really, really an underutilized resource. Yeah.
For conserving water, many municipalities have, they give you a break on your water bill if you, for the number of trees and shrubs that you have on your property. You can apply to have your water bill reduced if you are doing measures to keep water from rushing off into the storm.
Yeah, storm sewer. Actually. I know there's a love-hate relationship with rain barrel collection because of mosquitoes. Please be very careful about that. One of the ways to mitigate mosquitoes in rain barrels is a 19th century way of preventing that, which is by putting a couple of goldfish in your rain barrel. It may or may not work, but that is enough. Yeah.
Get rid of Japanese beetles on rose bushes.
I don't know how, and I wish I could tell you how to get rid of Japanese beetles off rose bushes. That they are an absolutely atrocious pest that is clearly one of our most dangerous right now because there's just nothing. They have no predator. There's no predator.
They are edible.
They're edible?
Yes.
For these Japanese beetles, like brown them in flour.
Teacher named Tim Clements. He's just really cool and great. But
So everyone has homework now.
actually gonna be having some tours, or like you can go out with him, and he does have one for Japanese beetles,
Sure.
and will teach you how to make them.
Awesome. Fine.
One idea.
Great.
As we learn how, like, it's amazing too, how many plants we can eat
Yeah.
that we don't even
Yeah.
plant in our yard.
Yeah. The weeds.
Or
The weeds, yeah. the
Yeah, or
weeds.
make teas out of these native plants. Yeah.
I want to be respectful. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just want to say, so if anyone thinks they're gonna have rain barrels and put the goldfish in them, to please, at the end of the year, either overwinter them yourself or kill them. Do not put them in the lakes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
God, yeah.
Don't put them in the lakes.
You're being so nice to little swimming is just ruining it
No.
for the other
Yeah.
fish.
No,
in
yeah.
it.
That's another, thank you for bringing that up. Yes,
And don't flush them.
don't flush them. No, throw them into your compost. throw them in.
There's a question about the Bruentrup Farm itself.
Yeah.
Is it open to the public? What hours or?
It's a great, thank you for whoever asked that question. We are kind of running out of time, so I do want to be respectful of that, but I'll answer this question and any last questions, and then I'll leave you with a couple of tips and my best practices. But the Bruentrup Heritage Farm is open primarily mid-May through the first week in December. We have big special events, but then kind of our public season is every Sunday from June, at the beginning of June to the end of September. We have our farmers market. So farmers market out here. I know Kathleen's been to the farmers market, and we have, it's more than just a farmers market. And we have programming, we do tours, we have music, we have, it's like a mini county fair out here. And that's Sundays from 9 to 1, starting June 1st this year, I think, or June 2nd. I don't know which day is Sunday, but June 1st through the end of September. A couple of our big events coming up. We have our big Red Barn Folk Arts Fair on May 10th. That is a big fundraiser for us. There is over 100 and Brittany, how many vendors do we have? 117 local crafters and businesses that will have their wares for sale here at the farm, and that's a big fundraiser for us.
May what?
That's May 10th. And then we also have our Civil War weekend. We'll have 60 living history interpreters out here talking about Minnesota's connection to the Civil War. That is May 17th, 18th, and 19th, I believe. 16th. Thank you, Brady. Yeah. So there's lots of events going on. And then you can always just, the grounds are always open to walk around. I will offer, if folks want to hang around, we can go look at some of our projects or tour the farm after this as well. So if you want to hang out for a while, we can. Yes.
Can you just come and sit on a bench and
Always.
do you have Wi-Fi?
Always. There is Wi-Fi.
Okay, because we've been meeting at the Caribou down there to do our.
I'll come up here.
Okay.
There's a book club meets in the gazebo, like all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so there's benches, there's picnic tables, there's the gazebo.
Yeah. What is it?
This one, that's a swallowtail there.
No.
Flowers?
Oh, the flower, the purple flower, yes, that might have been on.
Purple fox.
These are all photos from the farm here as well. So these are all.
That's a dandelion.
That's what Dan.
That's a dandelion.
No, that one.
It's a dandelion.
Welcome to America.
Which is again a non-native, but a beneficial, right? So it is. I just want to leave you all with some a couple of best practices. If you can only do one thing, plant a tree or a bush. Because the amount of flowers that come off of a tree and a bush is tens of thousands compared to one plant. So you can only do one thing, plant a tree or a bush. If you can plant one tree or bush, plant local willow. Willow is so good because it is the first pollen producing plant of the season. So throughout the rest of the year, pollinators are going to have a better time finding food sources, but local willow is really, really the way to go. If you can do one thing, if you can do that, that's awesome. But trees and shrubs are great because all of them, even if you don't see a flower on them, they've got a flower. They're producing pollen and nectar and all of that. So that's great. And then the other thing is mulch. Keep that moisture in the ground. Keep it. We don't want moisture to evaporate into the air because then it's worthless to the plants and the environment we're trying to protect.
And make sure it's not dyed.
Yes, don't use dyed mulch.
What mulch do you like to use?
So we have a company that goes around and cleans up trees after cities cut down trees, and they produce mulch for us. So you'll see the big mulch pile out there. So we're lucky that we get that donated to us for free. But I think, call around to some of these, a lot of places will actually, they're looking for ways to get rid of mulch. If you can do a double chip, it's like if it's multiple through, but just any sort of tree, if it's less than 2 by 2, bugs won't carry through. So if we're talking about, any sort of beetles or anything that are dangerous, a 2 by 2 chip won't be able to house a bug or anything. So even if it's ash, we're gonna not spread those ash borers and that kind of stuff. What do you have to say?
There's a website called Chip Drop, which does what you're just saying, so.
Chip drop.
Chip Drop, yeah. I don't know, we have a space where we can get a big pile, probably like you, so I don't know if there's smaller amounts that can be delivered. And it's not scheduled necessarily, you just get it.
It's, I get it, yeah, so you've gotta have a space ready for it.
And it just
you just dump
overloads it, where to dump it.
Yeah.
It was great.
The other thing is, in terms of mulching, if you don't mulch, but plant pack, get plants as close together as possible. That'll help do some of that, but also be careful. We don't want to create mildew and then have all of them die. And then the last thing is plant ground cover and just let it die and go back. So if you can get, buckwheat is really great because it produces great nutrition for the soil, but it also captures a lot of carbon for its size. And then you just let it die down and work it back into the soil. Don't burn if you can't burn, or if you don't have to. Bury your twigs, your sticks, bury those. Because that's then carbon that's not being burned and going up into the atmosphere. That's carbon that's going back into the earth and helping with that. So those are just some of my top things to suggest. And any other online comments do we have?
No, I think we got them
We're
covered.
good. Anything else? There are tons of, oh, yes.
Cost of seed has really gone up. Do you have any recommendations for places to order seeds?
I don't, because it's expensive. I mean, part of it's demand, right? As more people are becoming more aware of climate.
Collect seeds in the fall.
Yes, do seed collecting, right? What was the, I think it's
Libraries have seeds.
seed lending libraries.
Right.
Be careful with that though, that you're really being aware of what the seeds are as well. Because you can get those non-native invasives that get mixed in with that.
White Bear Lake is
So,
pretty particular.
White Bear Lake's got a good one. Just Badness has one now.
We're setting one up.
Yeah.
We got a grant from the Lions Club to,
Awesome.
Vadnais Green Team is setting up a seed library along with a book library for climate change as well.
Great.
Books to tell kids about climate.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out today. I'm going to push NEMCO one more time. Please get involved with NEMCO. We're a great organization. Utilize us here at the Maplewood Area Historical Society as well. There's tons of treats. You're all welcome to hang out and chat and visit for the rest of the afternoon if you want. And in a little bit, if you want to kind of walk around, I can show you our composting and some of our other stuff. I'm happy to do that. So just let me know if you'd like that as well. And then,
And one more thing, that you can put your used coffee mugs on a black tray next to the treats. Eat.
yes, thanks everyone. This is great.
What pages are those? Who's writing the crazy? Did you hear they're ripping up our land? So we want to get there.
We have, I think, some takers.